exactly what one might call a pro-Catholic news reporting. They are actually coming out talking about the persecution of Catholics against the Chinese government. And I was very surprised to see this considering the source. Now, the headline is A Jealous God, China Remakes Religion in Its Own Image. Authorities are violating religious freedoms across China as the leadership seeks to assert control. Now, what about the story struck your interest, Brent?
Well, it's interesting. We certainly have theological differences with
A
believers
couple,
in the
maybe one or
Islamic
two.
faith. Maybe a couple. But they're interested, at least in terms of areas where there is religious oppression, where Muslims are not allowed to practice their faith. They're interested in the issue of religious liberty, at least in those countries. Now, religious liberty in Muslim countries, different issue. And we're familiar with oppression in Pakistan, for example, where Christians are very unfairly and wrongly persecuted there. But it's a rather long article, as news stories go these days. They go and interview Chinese citizens. They're talking to Catholics who are describing what it is like to be a Catholic and to try to practice the faith in China. The comment, the communist God is a jealous God that does not want anyone to compete with its power, is one of the comments that's in the story. And that's really, the goal of the Chinese system. So
It's interesting because in the article it says, according to Liu, pressure is mounting on China's Catholics, who number as many as 10 million people in a country that is officially atheist. It's very interesting. It goes on and says, the government is trying to control everything about our religion, how our church looks, what our priests are, the way we pray, Liu said. She is convinced that it's not just Catholic communities that are feeling the way the Chinese party state. I think different groups all over China are having trouble with the government. This is very much the case. It's very interesting to see how many Catholics are there, and yet we kind of are throwing the Chinese Catholics under the bus. I haven't really been going out and defending them, and I haven't really been going out there to help them. In fact, we've been doing the exact opposite. We haven't really sent anybody aid. Instead, we kind of endorsed the Chinese Communist Party's church. The official church of the Chinese Party has been giving more and more winks and nods from legitimate authorities. A very concerning situation.
Well, and the article is an even-handed article. It talks about the existence of the traditional, faithful, genuine Catholic Church in China, and it talks about the creation of the essentially competitive alternative Catholic Church, so-called Catholic Church, backed by the Chinese Communist Party. It talks about the agreement between the Vatican and China, and to put it politely, it's somewhat skeptical. They quote one Chinese citizen as saying it shows the inability, of the Vatican to read the political landscape in China. Says analysts say it's politically naive if the Vatican believes it can make a deal with Beijing that would grant the Catholic Church increased religious autonomy. Now, we have to believe and hope that the Holy Father and the members of the Curia are making their best efforts in terms of dealing with China. But when you consider the history of Marxism around the world, when you consider the history of Marxism in China and the current regime, the Holy Father and the Curia have their work cut out for them in dealing with these people. You have to get permission every time you go to church in China. If you want to go to Mass, if you want to go to any kind of church service, you have to get permission every single time.
Yeah, it's very concerning, especially since in 2 days, September 30th, whenever they're appointing new cardinals, one of the cardinals that are being appointed from China is at the very least, a sympathizer to the Chinese Communist Party and has attended many, many events with the official church-sanctioned, or the communist-sanctioned church in China. And that's very, very difficult to see what the strategy is there to appoint a Chinese Communist Party-friendly bishop as a cardinal. I don't really know what a possible solution is gleaned from that. But we're seeing the same thing happen both in the church, but also in the U.S. government. Because the U.S. House Oversight Committee had just obtained bank records revealing that 2 payments were made by the Chinese individuals to an account linked to President Joe Biden's Delaware residence during the 2019 presidential campaign. Now, this was $250,000, and then the second one was $10,000. I kind of wonder what happened there between that. Maybe the deal was $260,000, and they were like, "Oh, we forgot to give you $10,000," because $10,000 seems like a very low amount. But I mean, it's a lot for me, but for that kind of thing, it seems like a low amount. So it's funny to me because people have been raving about Donald Trump's relationship with China and Russia, and we had 4 years of investigations of him. And honestly, it's kind of funny because despite the moral failings of Donald Trump, he is like the cleanest president we've ever had, considering they've done more investigations of him than anyone else ever, and they still haven't been able to arrest him for it. It's kind of funny if you think about it. But Joe Biden, before an impeachment has even happened, the U.S. Oversight Committee has now confirmed that this is, in fact, the case, that he is receiving money. Now, some people are saying, no, it was going to his residence, but it was actually to Hunter Biden, and Hunter Biden was living at Joe Biden's house at the time. And I'm thinking, even so, you're going to be money's coming into your home, into the person that's living with you. That's very interesting, especially considering that Hunter Biden's text message had been revealed saying that he was, to his daughter, saying that he has to pay for his dad's stuff. That sounds like corruption to me. And it's very interesting that this is happening. And I wonder, is this a reason why they're not standing up against the Chinese Communist Party? Is it all about the money at the end of the day? Is it a pay-to-play scheme? Very interesting to see. When we come back, we're going to finish this story because we also found out some information about his relationship with Ukraine. So that and much more coming up on Catholic Drive Time, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more.
This is Dale Ahlquist with a Chesterton Minute. How many times have you heard the complaint that church is boring, that we just do the same things over and over again? Well, the problem is not that church is boring, it's that we are bored. We are the problem. And not just with church, but with everything else. We have lost our childlike sense of wonder. G.K. Chesterton says that children have abounding vitality, and yet they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, "Do it again," and the grown-up person does it until he's nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony, but perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It's possible that God says every morning, "Do it again" to the sun, and every evening, "Do it again" to the moon. Want more than a minute? Chesterton.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently cruising at 39,000 feet. We'll turn that seatbelt sign off for you and let you move about the cabin. Looks like we're about 2 hours and 10 minutes from landing. Plenty of time for you to do some Bible reading.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone read the Bible regularly? Why not start today? A friendly suggestion from Guadalupe Radio Network.
And welcome back to Catholic Drive Time. This is your host, Adrian Fonseca. It's so good to be on with you today. Praise be to God. It's always good to be here. Thank you for being here. Now, it's really funny. It's not funny in a ha-ha way. It's more funny in a this is crazy kind of way. This whole situation with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the reason why I bring it up is because this story's been going on for a while, and I haven't really been keeping up with it, at least not on the show. I've been keeping up with it privately in my own interest, but I haven't really talked about it because at the end of the day, I was like, I mean, we all know he's corrupt at the end of the day. What does this actually affect in our lives? But I was talking to a friend the other day, and they were unaware that Joe Biden was receiving money from Russia and Ukraine and China, and that there was relationships between the Ukrainian government and the United States government and the United States and putting in our own personnel throughout the Ukrainian government, and that they were unaware of all these things, and they were trying to tell me we were having this discussion. They're saying, "Oh, Donald Trump's so corrupt. Donald Trump receiving money from all these groups, and Donald Trump and business deals, and all these different things." And I've never been, if anyone who listens to the show regularly knows, I've never been a Donald Trump apologist. But simply is the case that Donald Trump is the cleanest president that we've ever had, despite his moral failings, which I've discussed ad nauseum. And I won't go through again because I'd hate the idea that, oh, you got to hedge and say, oh, I disagree with this, this, and this before I can say anything positive. But this is simply the case. And so I was like, okay, this needs to be discussed more because clearly people are unaware that Joe Biden has these kind of ties. So Timcast News, amongst many other sites, and I've kind of just synthesized it into a short little excerpt here. In July, Senator Chuck Grassley released a document detailing potentially illicit ties between the Biden family and a number of contacts in Ukraine, where Biden has sent more than $100 billion in aid and supplies since becoming president. Do you realize how much money that is? President Biden and the U.S. government has sent, and I say President Biden specifically, because a lot of these things have not come to the legislator. A lot of these things are backwards dealings. Like, for instance, we had sent the money over to Ukraine, and we had already extended all the money that we had agreed upon giving. And then we went backwards and said, oh, actually, we were wrong about the price of the guns and the tanks and the planes. It's actually, they were cheaper than we said. And so actually, we still owe them another $100 million. And so they then sent them more money and more supplies because they just changed the prices on things. That's the way they get around being able to get the voters' representation into this situation. It's absolutely absurd because what did our founding fathers, what is the big thing that everybody knows? No taxation without representation. Well, we're being taxed. The U.S. government, the U.S. population, the U.S. citizens are being taxed without representation by us changing prices and just sending things over to Ukraine. Now, going back to this, the document recorded the testimony of confidential sources from the FBI who claimed that Biden and his son Hunter received a combined $10 million in bribery schemes involving Ukrainian energy company Burisma. Now, that's a whole nother story that would take a while to cover, but it's worth looking into. It's a story about Burisma and Hunter Biden's being appointed to the board of Burisma, despite having zero qualifications to do so, and happens after Joe Biden becomes the vice president. Very interesting. Although initially dismissed by some news outlets as unverified, a subsequent report confirmed that the FBI has corroborated parts of the document. This is very interesting, and it should definitely keep us up to date and our eyes open about the Biden family's international business dealings. I think that if you're going to be a public servant, well, this has to be something that is something you decide you want to give up some goods in order to serve the common good. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you're going to run for government, especially places like governor, president, things like this, senators, House of Representatives, it should not be the case that you can enrich yourself this way. That you're going to make a sacrifice to do this. You're going to lose money by doing this. You're going to actually put up some of your money. You're going to say, well, you know what? While I am senator, while I'm in the House, while I'm president, I will make no business deals. I will invest no money. Yeah, that's not fair, but it's also not required that you become president. This is a voluntary thing. Now, do I think that we should pass a law making this the case? Probably not, but I do think there has to be something to do with trying to restrict people from being able to enrich themselves off of their dealings in these public offices, as civil servants, they call themselves. And our friend Brent Haynes knows all about being a civil servant. That you get paid buku bucks, right, Brent?
Well, you know how monks take a vow of poverty, Adrian?
Yes, sir.
And people in Catholic radio do. A lot of us in government service are just one step above that.
And it's interesting, though, because somehow a lot of these people end up becoming filthy rich off of it. And so how does that happen if civil servants don't get paid as much as people in private practices?
Isn't it interesting how Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House for so many years, is a multimillionaire through her husband's shrewd investments? Remember, it's only been a few months since some of these scandals have come to light, and there was an effort to pass a bill in Congress that would prohibit congressmen and congresswomen from investing in the stock market because they get access to information that gives them an insider's advantage, and they still have not passed that bill, Adrian.
Very interesting. I mean, that's the other thing. How on earth do you get something like that passed when it directly interferes with what they want?
You have to have some integrity, don't you?
I don't know who that would be willing to do something like that. It's just absolutely mind-blowing to think that somebody would be willing to give up power that way.
Well, there are those who are trying. Look, that bill, like other legislation, will pass when the American people insist on it.
Oh, speaking of American people insisting upon things, a recent poll came out, or not, Pew Research came out, 65% of Americans are in favor of moving to popular vote to decide the presidency. This is very concerning because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the American system.
It is.
If this happens, Brent and I were talking about this the other day about the American system and the legitimate forms of government. And by doing that, this is one of the things the Founding Fathers did in order to prevent mob rule. Because this is the great problem of democracies. The great problem of democracies, it has a high likelihood of devolving into mob rule, where 51% of the population governs 49% of the population. This is not what we have as a system of government here for good reason. We have an electoral college, and this is the problem. Whenever Republicans start winning in terms of popular vote, but lose the electoral college, Republicans are like, we need to get rid of the electoral college. And then when vice versa, the Democrats win the popular vote, but they lose the electoral college, they're saying, we need to get rid of the electoral college. And so nobody has actual principles. That's the problem.
Well, you said it best when you said there's a misunderstanding. Look, the Founding Fathers really did create, for all their flaws, slavery being the biggest, they created an ingenious system of government. They decentralized power and they dispersed power. And what people forget is that the federal government was not supposed to be the huge, massive, overreaching government that it is today. The states were the main governments when this nation was founded. The U.S. Constitution ingeniously divides authority and divides sovereignty between the states, which gives us control at the local level through our states, and the national government. And the point of the Electoral College is it makes the individual states significant. The reason every state has 2 senators in the United States Senate, instead of having members based entirely on the amount of the population they have, like we have in the U.S. House of Representatives, is because the Senate is geared to recognize the states as distinct political bodies. We announced yesterday on Catholic Drive Time, we announced the news that had been in the media that had just come out that Governor Newsom of California, a very Democrat state, is going to debate Governor Ron DeSantis from Florida, a very Republican state. Those states are distinct. They have different cultures. They have different values. They have different political philosophies that are dominant in each. And that debate will highlight a clash of ideas that exists because the voters in those states have chosen to enact different policies by electing different politicians. Mm-hmm. When you say, well, we want to have just a popular vote to elect the president, you're wiping out the importance of the states. Presidential candidates will campaign primarily in the large urban centers, and in the big states, they will ignore states like Iowa, West Virginia, Delaware.
And they will completely ignore the small cities like Abilene, like Midland.
It will de-emphasize the small states and the so-called flyover country. But the point is that the Electoral College plays an important role. It requires politicians to pay attention to all parts of the country. Mm-hmm. My home state of West Virginia is still important because it has a tiny amount of electoral votes, but in these close races we have everyone counts. Mm-hmm. There are 2 states where electoral votes are divided not just at the state level, but at the congressional district level, Nebraska and Maine. Guess what? Nebraska tends to go Republican, but one of those districts goes Democrat. In Maine, it tends to be the reverse. What does that do for candidates? It means the candidates go there. They pay attention to those people. So this effort to simply turn the presidential election into a simple majority vote does exactly what you said. It turns it over into, we don't have to say mob rule, but majority rule. The Electoral College is part of a system to disperse power and to protect the minority from the majority. The best example of protecting the minority from the majority is right there in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Why do we have the Bill of Rights? Because the Founding Fathers knew that sometimes you can't trust men with power.
Yep. Well, I mean, the Bill of Rights, hotly debated, but the thing that people debated was not what you think it would be. What they debated was, man, if we give them a Bill of Rights, they might think that these are their only rights.
That was a big issue.
And that was the biggest issue.
That was one of the issues because they were called the Anti-Federalists, as you know, because they were concerned if we just list these rights, if we enumerate these rights and only these rights, people might think these are the only ones. So, of course, they put in,
a way of amending it.
The 10th Amendment. But the point is that the Bill of Rights is the perfect example that we don't just have majority rule. We have majority rule for most things that don't interfere with fundamental rights. But we don't put it up to majority rule as to whether or not to have free speech.
Right. Right. I mean, it's very concerning once we get to that system. But what is it? The thing about this that is very telling to me is the fact that this shows that the majority of Americans are not content with our form of government. They're not content with our political system currently. In fact, in that same research study, they says about 4% of U.S. adults say the political system is working extremely or very well. About 60% express not much or no confidence in the future of the U.S. political system. Just 16% of the public say they trust the federal government always or most of the time. I want to meet that 16%. 63% of Americans say that they are dissatisfied with their options for presidential candidates. 65% say they always or often feel exhausted when thinking about politics. And when asked to sum up their feelings about politics, 79% use negative or critical words, with divisive and corrupt being used most frequently. What does this tell me? Well, this tells me that what we need is to go back to say Christ is king. Because I guarantee you, if Christ is king, you'll be happy with your king. I promise. I promise. Because he's always going to make the right decision. So let's pray for the reign of Christ the King and say, Viva Cristo Rey. We'll be right back with more right after this.
I would always hear from different people at non-Catholic churches that Catholics were going to hell, or that they really didn't know who the Lord was. The Catholic Church is not all what people say it is. I mean, it's completely different. There's so many stereotypes. It's very possible to know the Lord, and it's very possible to have a relationship with God in the Catholic Church. I believe I was born into the Catholic Church, and that's where I belong.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church, visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Have you heard about life coaching? Hi, this is Coach Felicity with your Stand Tall Today Coaching Minute. Coaching is one of the things Jesus did with his disciples. Whenever they were stuck, overwhelmed, or even struggling a bit, Jesus asked questions that brought clarity and hope. He then used ongoing conversations that helped them to navigate the path and completely change their lives. Just like the disciples, we too can find ourselves feeling stuck, overwhelmed, and struggling a bit. Maybe you need help in your marriage or with a parenting issue. You're navigating a loss, you want to improve your health, or advance your career. At StandTallToday.com, our experienced coaches will help you to take another look at life, renew your hope, get past those challenges, and step into living abundantly. You can find out more about coaching and schedule a free introductory call by visiting us at StandTallToday.com. Listen, life is too short to stay stuck. Contact us at StandTallToday.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're currently cruising at 39,000 feet. We'll turn that seatbelt sign off for you and let you move about the cabin. Looks like we're about 2 hours and 10 minutes from landing. Plenty of time for you to study a section of the Catechism.
Wouldn't it be great if everyone read the Catechism of the Catholic Church? Why not start today? A friendly suggestion from Guadalupe Radio Network.
When I was outside of the church, there was always an unsettled feeling. There was always a feeling of something missing and something not complete. The deal clincher is we found our way to our parish, and we met just an incredible pastor. We learned things that we'd never been taught. Wouldn't be the person that I am without the church and without the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist. I can't live without it.
If you've been away from the Catholic Church, visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
And welcome back to Catholic Drive Time. This is your host, Adrian Fonseca. It's so good to be on with you today. Praise be to God. I was just talking in the last hour, just wrapping up discussion about the Electoral College and why we should not abolish the Electoral College, and how most Americans just don't have a civics education about why the Electoral College exists. But I tell you what I do endorse. I do endorse the abolishing of the Electoral College if, by doing so, we then have the majority vote make me king, and then I just abolish voting, and I just make all the rules myself. And that's the endorsement I will make. But unless we're going to do that, then I say we keep the system as it is, because it is much better than the alternative. But instead of going on and on about some bad news, let's talk about something really great. And whenever I want to talk about something great, I always have Alan Smith with Bishop Sheen today join us. Good morning to me. Good morning to me. Good morning to you, Alan Smith. Good morning, Mr. Smith.
Good morning, Adrian. It is great to be here. Many of the listeners know that I live in the great white north of Canada, and today we woke up to 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
40 degrees.
Again, 40 degrees. I've got the hoodie on. We get our want to say fall wear out, which is the winter jackets and the hoodies. But again, just feeling comfortable, and but again, great to be alive. And did a bit of spiritual reading this morning, and of course opened up one of Archbishop Sheen's 66 books, and so always lots to share. So thanks for having me on this morning.
So what are you reading currently?
Well, I've been reading Archbishop Sheen's writings on Saint Therese because I've been doing a lot of presenting about the holy face of Jesus. And of course, everyone sees that beautiful picture of Saint Therese of the child Jesus and the holy face. Again, that beautiful portrait of her holding the two pictures of the child Jesus and the holy face. And so Fulton Sheen, and many people don't know this, but in 1948, he became a third order Carmelite. And again, Roman Catholic priests can become third order Dominicans, third order Franciscans, third order, the list is endless, it seems. But he had a great love for Carmel. And of course, this love for Saint Therese and her writings. And so, again, he made that pledge to become a third order Carmelite and follow, to some degree, their rule. And so a lot of people are, when they hear that, they go, wow, I didn't know that about Fulton Sheen. But again, this love story he has with Saint Therese, and it's so beautiful. And of course, they put together a book of his homilies that in 1973, on the 100th anniversary of the birth of Saint Therese, they celebrated this great gathering in Ireland, and Fulton Sheen gave 11 reflections, and those reflections were put into a book called Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen's A Treasured Love Story, Saint Therese. And again, just life lessons are in here. Just a beautiful book. And so I've been enjoying that and taking some notes. So when I give these presentations on the Holy Face, I've got something to offer. So that's what I've been reading.
Wow. I read that book a number of years ago, and that is the book that made me actually have a love for Saint Therese of Lisieux. And I've mentioned this before in the past, and I completely admit there's a defect on my own part, but I just don't like the story of a soul. I never got into it. I've tried to read it, and I just never could like it. It was just too syrupy for me, for my taste. But I recognize it's my fault, not anyone else's, because everyone who is holy and good thinks it's amazing. So it says more about me than it does about St. Therese of Lisieux. But nonetheless, I read this book by Fulton Sheen, and I just fell in love with Therese of Lisieux. I was like, wow, I need to have a devotion to this great woman. And one of the things about Therese that I think is amazing is how young she was. She was 24 years old, and she had this image in her face. And we think about the holy face, that picture, especially that picture of her holding the holy face and the child Jesus. And then you see her face. And I despise the iconography that people make of her, that have her with the rosy cheeks, with plump red lips, and they make her look mm, just so sweet. But when you see her in actuality, you do see that there is a delicateness in her, but there's also a strong gaze on her. And she's very sweetly serene, but also you can see the intensely reflective nature in her eyes and in her demeanor. That her face is just stamped with a tranquil acceptance of suffering and the life of the cross. And then you compare that to the holy face that she's holding in her hands, and you can tell who and what she's always thinking of. What say you, Alan Smith?
Yes, so true. I mean, we had prayer cards made up, and of course, for those who are watching on YouTube and other social medias, this beautiful picture of her holding those pictures of the Holy Face and the child Jesus. But I think what people have to understand is that you start to, I'm not say look like your environment, but remember the environment that you're in. Sometimes it can affect how you look. And Saint Therese's life, again, for a Carmelite, again, it is a life of prayer and service. Again, we're so used to heating and air conditioning. You know, when it's cold in the winter, we have the heat on, and when it's hot in the summer, we have air conditioning. But in the Carmel, again, they didn't have these luxuries, but they just had a great life of serving each other and praying to God and becoming holy. And of course, St. Therese spent a great deal of time meditating on the Holy Face, but meditating on the life of the child Jesus. It's a great spiritual journey to take up this exercise of thinking about Jesus as a child, thinking about those tender moments of him as an infant in the arms of the Blessed Virgin Mary, him, of course, just going out into the workshop of St. Joseph and helping his father. All of these beautiful, tender stories that St. Therese took time to just meditate on. And I don't think we do that. You know, do we ever say to our friends, oh, I was meditating on the child Jesus this morning in the manger, and how the Magi and the shepherds came to adore him? We only do that at Christmas time, but not during the year. But St. Therese did that. And so she became what she meditated on. And of course, the innocence and joy of the child Jesus, and yet the serenity of our Lord in his suffering and his passion. Again, how he was committed to the mission that God the Father gave him to lay down his life for us. So a beautiful radiance of St. Therese in those two images of the child Jesus and the Holy Face.
That's so interesting. You see the innocence and the beauty and the serenity of the child Jesus, and you have that in contrast with the bruised and the beat and the suffering of the Holy Face, and you see those two side by side. And I think that's exemplified perfectly in Thérèse of Lisieux. And I think of the story of Thérèse of Lisieux, that once when a nun was helping her arrange her habit and inadvertently stuck a pin in her flesh, she didn't complain, but left the pin where it was until she retired for the evening. And I think about myself and my own lack of wanting to suffer. I mean, I get dental work done, and then I pop 3 Advils, 2 Tylenols, and I'm like, I don't want even this discomfort throughout the day of having that pain, so I just pop all these pills to try to make that pain go away. Whereas what would the saints have done? They probably would be like, oh, that dental pain hurts, but for love of you, I will endure the pain, and they wouldn't take the medicine. I think that's something that we've lost in today's is understanding that this pain, there's a goodness that can come from it if we just accept it versus try to always get rid of all pain immediately and everywhere.
Yes, and of course Saint Therese gives us a holy example. Her death was hard. I mean, she died of tuberculosis, and we see pictures of her on her deathbed, yet still had that serenity because she had practiced dying. She, of course, looked to our Lord and his suffering and his death. So she was given the example of how to die. And she had a beautiful death. And so yet she had those beautiful sentiments to say, I will spend my eternity doing good on earth. One thing Trez can teach us is a valuable lesson. When she was a little girl, she was sitting on her father's lap and she was looking into the stars, and she saw the letter T. So she knew that her name was written in heaven. She had that holy confidence that she was made forever, and that she was rejoicing in God, her Savior, that she was going to be busy for eternity. And I think this is what we have to get into our heads. We were made for eternity. Get used to it. Get used to it. And to think, today we're waking up to serve our families, our friends, but one day we will wake up and serve the Lord for all eternity. So that joy of the holy work of Saint Therese, may we imitate her here on this life, and of course join her in the next.
It's really worthwhile that we're talking about this because her feast day is coming up here, I think on Tuesday, I want to say. I believe that's right. It might be Wednesday, but I'm trying to go off of memory here. And I think it's October 3rd, and it's a glorious time to meditate upon such a holy and wonderful woman. So it's divine providence that you come on today, talk about this. One more thing about the child Jesus. Now, this is a very popular devotion in other countries, but in our country, obviously there are people who are of Filipino descent that have a great devotion to the child Jesus. But in general, we kind of don't really get the whole child of Jesus thing. We kind of just, it's something that we see other people do, but we don't quite understand it ourselves. And the Holy Face makes a lot of sense. But the child of Jesus, what say you? Why the devotion there?
Well, because again, the Holy Face, although we think of his passion, I meditate on how our Blessed Mother would wipe the face of Jesus as a little boy. Wipe his face even as a young man. Of course, just always practicing those tendernesses towards the mother and child. But yet we think of children and their holy innocence, but yet they come in all dirty from playing outside, and their mothers wipe their face. And so we have that opportunity to compassion our Lord. And I think this is what Saint Therese teaches us. Practice this devotion of compassioning him, looking upon his face. Of course, the suffering Christ, the veil of Veronica, or the shroud of Turin, those images, but to also not just compassion our Lord in his suffering moments, but make a nice tenderness towards looking at the child Jesus and saying, oh, you're so beautiful. Thank you for dying for me. Thank you for coming into this world and taking on human flesh and dwelling among us. But the beauty of the child's face. And so we have to look at things that are beautiful, because that's what brings us to God. We've always taught that, again, it's the beautiful that will bring us to God. And so looking at a beautiful young boy, a picture of the child Jesus, can bring joy into our hearts, and we need more joy. So again, get a picture of the Holy Face in your life, but get a picture of the child Jesus. A beautiful statue of the Infant of Prague is a good practice, and bring some joy into your life. Looking at children, it does a great work in your soul, and
Amen.
So we need more of that.
Amen. I know I have a baby fever every time I see a child. I'm like, oh, I want one. But yeah, having a child of the image of the child Jesus, a wonderful thing. And I have a devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Help, and I have her image all over the place. And what is in are the hands of Our Lady of Perpetual Help, but the child Jesus. So I think that's a wonderful thing. So definitely, I think the advice of Alan Smith every single week is get some good images around you. Get some good holy images around you, be it the Holy Face, be it the child Jesus, be it whatever it is that most speaks to your heart. Go ahead and do so today. If you can get high quality images, go do it. If you can afford, hire a professional painter. If you can't, go print some prints. Whatever you got to do, get some holy images around you. But God bless you, Alan. We'll see you in the after show. God bless you. God love you.
God love you too.
And check it out, Bishop Sheen Today, bishopsheentoday.com. Make sure you check out all of Alan's work, bishopsheentoday.com. We're going to go into our Fear and Trembling game show. Make sure you call in right now, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. That number, one more time, 877-757-9424. You can call in, and we always take the first caller. So if you are the first caller, you will, in fact, be our contestant and have a chance to win this week's prize. So make sure you call in 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. We'll be right back with more right after this.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Because Jesus said in Matthew 23 that no one should be called rabbi, father, or teacher, I'm sure you would never call one of your teachers teacher, would you? Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, a Catholic no-no, calling a priest father. Well, what about Paul calling Timothy, Titus, and Onesimus his sons? No doubt his spiritual sons, but is it not proper for a spiritual son to call his spiritual father father? This reverential title should never have generated such a big point of contention. Secondly, the New Testament. In Acts 7 and Romans 9, we see the term father being used referring to Abraham and some of our great patriarchs. And my take, isn't context everything? When Jesus is speaking to the multitudes, it's oftentimes in the language and style of hyperbole. His discourse was not focused on titles or ecclesiastical guidelines. Jesus was once again warning against giving honor where honor is not due. Next time you see your pastor, just say, "Hey, preacher." That just seems so lacking.
So many of us carry such heavy burdens.
Come on, babe. It'll be fun. It's just you and me.
Deep within, we struggle because sin separates us from God. But thanks to the grace of confession, God compassionately listens, forgives, and sets us free. So if it's been a while since you've been to confession or Mass, come home and experience a fresh start. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org.
Welcome to another round of fear and trembling. The Catholic Trivia Game Show that helps you work out your salvation by the seat of your pants. It's a 50-50 chance and prizes are involved. Avoid the weeping and gnashing of teeth. Call now to take your shot. 877-757-9424.
877-757-9424. 877-757-9424. If you call now, you could be the winner, because I have good news for you, because right now, the next person to dial in will, in fact, be our contestant. Will have the chance to be the winner. So make sure you dial that number, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. That is the number, and you could, in fact, be our winner. That's all you got to do is pick up the phone and dial that number. Now, you may be asking, what exactly am I calling in for? What exactly is going on? Well, let me tell you. I have here in front of me 3 Catholic trivia questions. The trick is, I'm not going to ask you the questions. No, instead, I'm going to ask Brent the questions. He's going to give me an answer, and it's your job to tell me whether or not he is right or whether or not he is wrong. Every right answer will go into the coffee cup of divine providence to win this week's prize. And this week's prize is a book from Bishop Sheen today. We're just talking to Alan Smith from Bishop Sheen today, and we're going to be giving away a book from Bishop Sheen today. An excellent, wonderful work of Fulton Sheen on the, I believe it's the 7 Virtues is the book that we're giving away. And plus, we'll throw in some CDT goodies. So make sure that you are on our list right here to call in, because we'd love to make sure that you are getting that prize. So that number, 877-757-9424. And if you don't want to be able to write our number in because it's just too difficult, well, make sure you go to our website. Go to grnonline.com/CDT, grnonline.com/CDT, and call then, and you can get our number there, email, all that stuff, sign up for our email list. All that is available by going to our email list and going to our website, rather, grnonline.com/CDT. But joining us right now is Amy. Good morning to you, Amy.
Good morning.
Amy.
I have Sebastian, my son, here with me too. He's 5.
Praise be to God. Good morning to you, Sebastian.
Say hi. You're good? Okay.
Praise be to God. Praise be to God. I love it. Where are y'all off to this morning?
I am about to drop him off at his Catholic school.
Praise be to God.
PH, Our Lady of Perpetual Help.
Hey, I love Our Lady of Perpetual Help. That's
I know. I heard that.
That's perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, praise be to God. I'm glad y'all called in this morning. What city are you calling in from?
We're close to San Antonio. We're just outside. It's called Cibolo.
Cibolo. Okay, Cibolo near San Antonio area. Well, praise be to God.
Yeah.
Amy, I think that's pretty awesome. Now, are y'all familiar with the game? Do y'all know how to play?
We do know how to play.
Perfect. Then you know this week you can Brent is a lawyer, and he keeps a amazing poker face. So you had to have a discerning ear to make sure that you're able to tell that whether or not he is trying to trick you or whether or not he is giving you a true answer. I mean, can you ever really trust a lawyer?
I hope so.
I know so. You can. Some lawyers you can trust. Now, Sebastian, I know you're going to have to help your mom here. I know you're an expert theologian at 5 years old, going to Catholic school, going to Our Lady Perpetual Help.
Huh?
So he's going to be able to give you the answers. So no cheating, Sebastian, but nonetheless, you can still help your mom. Are y'all ready to play?
You ready to play?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Question number 1, Brent, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. The question on the board is, what does the Roman Rota, or the Vatican Court, deal with primarily?
Well, you remember that yesterday one of our questions was, does the Vatican have a jail?
That's right. I remember that.
Well,
I was here.
They have a jail, as you will remember. And, of course, they have a court. It's called the Roman Rota. And it deals with crimes that are committed in the Vatican city-state.
Oh. Like violent crimes, or what kind of crimes?
Whatever crimes there are. They found a news story that says they have one inmate at their jail now. He's a priest who, like on some sort of work release every day. I guess he spends the night there.
Oh, wow. Very interesting.
So presumably he went through that court, the Roman Rota.
All right, Amy, 15 seconds on the clock. The question on the board is, what does the Roman Rota, or the Vatican Court, deal with primarily? Now, Brent says that it's crimes, and that's why you got to have that Vatican jail we talked about yesterday. What say you, Amy and Sebastian?
No. What do you say, buddy? Huh? You say?
I'm still thinking.
We're going to say no.
Gonna say no. All right, let's see. Survey says that is correct. Way to go, Sebastian. Very intelligent. He could tell that Brent was trying to trick him, and he would not allow his mom to fall for it. The correct answer was legal questions concerning Catholic marriages, which makes sense. I mean, that is a major deal that goes through. I mean, I feel like the primary job of a canon lawyer is dealing with marriage issues. But praise be to God, Amy, you rocked it. Sebastian, good job on helping your mom. Are you ready for question number 2?
Ready?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do it. I like the energy. I like the enthusiasm. Brent, question number 2 for you. The question is, which cardinal virtue includes obedience?
As a lawyer, I'm glad to say my answer to the last question notwithstanding. The answer is justice.
Is justice.
The cardinal virtue of justice includes the virtue of obedience. Cardinal virtue of justice includes obedience.
Oh, so you're saying as a lawyer, because all lawyers are concerned with justice and not simply sophistry, right? Right, Brent?
Well, some lawyers take a second vow. Other lawyers,
Well, there you go, folks. All right, Amy and Sebastian, 15 seconds on the clock. The question on the board is, which cardinal virtue includes obedience? Well, Brent Haynes, attorney at law, says, as a lawyer, of course, I'm happy to say it's justice.
No.
No? Are you sure? You sure you want to go with no?
He says he's sure.
He's sure. All right. Let's see. Survey says, oh, I'm sorry, Sebastian. It is, in fact, correct that justice is the cardinal virtue and obedience is a sub-virtue of justice. For example, Sebastian, it would be you should be obedient to your mother out of justice because it is right and just, and according to the 4th commandment, that we obey and honor our father and mother. So it is, in fact, justice is the cardinal virtue in which obedience falls under. But don't worry, Sebastian, you did amazing. You're doing wonderful. You still got 1 out of 2 so far. Can you get the third one? I think you will. Are you ready for question number 3?
Yes.
All right, you got to be careful here because this could be a tricky question, but I think you and your mom will be able to get it correct. Question number 3, Brent. Now, as a lawyer, you had to learn Latin, right? At least a little bit.
No.
No, nothing. No Latin at all?
A tiny amount.
A tiny amount.
I had a debate with a priest friend of mine who used to work with lawyers and had to persuade him that we use almost no Latin in the law anymore.
Wow, that's sad. Neither in the church as well,
In a way,
I
it is
suppose.
sad because Latin's a great language.
Well, as we would say in Latin, you learn un poquito Latin. Or is that Spanish? I don't know. All right, the question is, what is the Latin word for the monstrance?
The Latin word for the monstrance is monstri.
Monstri.
But it's spelled at the end. That last syllable is A-E. You know how you see some Latin words that have singular, plural, A or A-E. It is monstri, but it is spelled A-E at the end.
Well, that sounds a lot like the way I make up words in Spanish. I just put L and then the word O, the letter O at the end of it. So I would say.
Are you saying I'm making this up?
I am not saying that. I would never say that. I'm just saying.
Because maybe I am.
If I was to make up this word in Spanish, I would say El Monstranzo. And that sounds like what you're doing here. But I don't know. Amy and Sebastian, it's their job to figure that out, not me. 15 seconds on the clock. Sebastian, the question is, what is the Latin word for the monstrance? Well, Brent's saying that it's monstri with an IE at the end. What say you, Sebastian and Amy?
What do you think, Sebastian?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay, we'll say true.
Are you sure you want to go with true?
No, we want to go with false.
She wants to go with false. All right, let's see. Survey says that is correct, Amy. Way to go. See, Sebastian, I knew you were a Latin scholar. I knew you'd be able to get that correct. Clearly, at 5 years old, they're teaching Latin at Our Lady of Perpetual Help, right?
They do Spanish, actually.
Oh, well, there you go. So he understood the El Monstranzo one then. That's the one he got.
Exactly.
Well, way to go, Amy and Sebastian. Our Lady of Perpetual Help, pray for us. The correct answer is actually, and now let me butcher my Latin here, ostensorium. Ostensorium is a name of the word in Latin. And so now you can add that, go to your Spanish class and be like, I may not know Spanish, but I do know the word monstrance in Latin, which is ostensorium, and you can write that down. It'll be a great little fun fact for you there. Now, praise be to God, y'all rocked it. Now, Sebastian, before we go, I gotta ask, what's your favorite subject in school so far?
The playground.
Playground? I didn't know there was a subject in school. Well, I gotta tell you, being on the playground is my favorite subject still. That is my favorite thing to do. No way. I, for one, do not have the upper body strength to do the monkey bars anymore. I need to work on that. Need to work on some pull-ups. But praise be to God, Sebastian, you're rocking it. But God bless you, God love you. We're going to put you on hold, and we're going to get your mom's contact information so that way if you get the answer, we get your name out Friday, we can send y'all the prize. But God love y'all, and God bless you.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
You as well. Putting you on hold. And that's going to do it for the radio side. If you want to join us in the after show, you're welcome to hop on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. Just look up Catholic Drive Time. Look up Catholic Drive Time on Facebook, Rumble, or on YouTube, and you can find us there. And you leave a comment, we'll interact with you directly, answer your questions, comments, or concerns, soapboxes, negativities, or positivities, or anything in between. We'd love to do so. So hop on with us. But if not, we'll see you back here 6 a.m. Central, 7 Eastern, across the Guadalupe Radio Network and Catholic Spirit Radio. God bless you, God love you, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you for joining us on Your Catholic Drive Time, where it is our pleasure to keep you informed and inspired.
Join us Monday through Friday at the same time, right here on your favorite Catholic radio station.
Don't forget to connect with us. Just go to facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Again, that's facebook.com/Catholic Drive Time.
Be sure to share more than just us today. Share Jesus with everyone you meet.
Bye now, and God love you.
And welcome back to the after show, where we're going to check out your comments here. Now, for some reason, I'm noticing we have 2 YouTube streams going at the same time. I don't know why. That happened yesterday. I remember that happening.
And I somehow always end up on the one with almost no viewers.
Yeah, I don't know why that's happening, but they got to figure out why and make sure that doesn't happen, because now we split our listeners in half, and that's no fun. The interaction is part of the fun here. So hopefully we don't let that happen anymore, but nonetheless, it is happening. Okay, so during the break earlier, Brent and I were having a discussion about the calendar, the calendar system in the church. And I was saying that the October 3rd is the feast of Teresa Lisieux. And that's because in the 1962 calendar, that's her feast day. And I attend the 1962 liturgy. And so I would be celebrating it on October 3rd. And if I went to Mass on October 3rd, that would be the feast day that would be celebrated. And if I went to Mass on, October 10th? October 11th? Is that what you were telling me? Was the feast day?
No, the official feast day now with the new calendar, the one that all the church goes by, it's October 1st. I think I shut that window, but whatever I sent you.
So if it's October 1st, if I go to Mass on October 1st, no one will be celebrating Teresa Lisieux.
Well, October 1st this year's on a Sunday, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess that's right.
But interestingly, the society says, going back to what you were saying is the really old tradition, is that her parish celebrates her feast day on September 30th, the actual day she died. And you're saying that's the older tradition.
Yeah, so the tradition is to celebrate the feast day on the day of their death, which is normally the case. However, it just depends on whenever they move it to putting it on the calendar. It's always an issue because they have to compare what is already on the calendar. And so they move feasts around, which is kind of one of the problems that people have with the new calendar, is that they kind of just moved a lot of people around because they wanted to emphasize certain saints and move certain saints out. It's like, for instance, the Feast of St. Valentine is not a feast day anymore. It's not even on the calendar. Secular celebrate St. Valentine's Day, but we don't anymore.
I remember when I became a new Catholic and mentioned something to the person who had really helped me, had really been on me to convert, and I said something about praying to St. Christopher, you know, as the patron saint of travelers, and her response was, never forget her response was, well, I'm sure some saint in heaven is answering those prayers.
Yeah, because they don't believe in St. Christopher, and St. Christopher was removed from the new calendar. And why did they remove him? They say he probably didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, a lot of legends grow up, so.
But I'm saying, like, how could the church be wrong for 1,700 years having him on the calendar?
Well, not everything the church does is dogmatic, right?
Right.
And that is a strength of the church, not a weakness.
Well, so then it comes to the question of the infallibility of the saints, of canonizations, right?
Now, and did you see that book that came, well, it's probably been a year now. See that book didn't you tell me you read that book, which I haven't had time to read, but where they, I think 4 different theologians or writers debate.
More than 4, but yeah.
More than 4. Yeah. And they debate the issue of whether the canonization is infallible. I had always thought that it was infallible. What's your opinion?
I don't think they are. I don't think it is. And I think that even those who say that it is, that it would be concerning, because now we're saying that we're having a double feed, Taylor. There you go. But it would be concerning because the new calendar is saying that a bunch of saints that we've been venerating for well over 1,000 years are not actual saints because they're not even real. They're not even real people, and we've been recognizing them as saints, praying to them, having feast days for them.
But the modern process of canonization is different than the popular cultural declaration of somebody as a saint that might have happened 1,800 years ago. But you're saying you think canonization of saints is not is or is not fallible?
Is fallible.
You're saying it is fallible.
Correct.
But people in purgatory can pray, right?
Right.
So if the saint, would-be saint, is not in heaven, if they're actually in purgatory, prayers to that putative
Unless they were not
saint
real.
could still be efficacious because they can't pray for themselves in purgatory, but they can pray for other intentions, right?
That is true.
Now, their prayers presumably would not be as effective as a saint who is there in the presence of God.
Right. Unless they're not even in purgatory. What if they're in hell?
That would be a pretty big thing, but only God knows.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And that's the thing is, ultimately we really don't know what's going on in somebody's private life or in their mind.
Right. But I also think your point about the canonization process is a good point, which is what a lot of people will point out in terms of the modern saints, that we changed dramatically the canonization process from pre-council to post-council. And so the pre-council, you had a devil's advocate, you had an X amount of miracles that were required, and then we kind of reduced the amount of miracles. And in fact, in many cases, we waive the miracles since they don't required.
What I've heard is these days you're supposed to have 2, but sometimes they'll waive it and go with 1.
Right. And they did that with Paul VI, was someone who they did that to. A number of saints have done that with. They also will waive lengths of time that you're supposed to wait in order to canonize somebody. They'll waive that. That'll happen very often. So that happens a lot, and that's a issue in my opinion. So
now, back in the old days, in the first centuries of the church, the people didn't wait. It was within the lifetime of the saint that they would often declare them a saint.
That is true. That is true.
Because they knew
So
them.
the question is, in what way? So where does the infallibility come from?
Well, it would come from the authority of the church, wouldn't it?
And what does that mean? Like, what do we mean by the church?
You acknowledge that. The whole point is that Christ gave authority to Peter, right? And the bishops, as the successors in the apostolic tradition to the apostles, have authority.
Right.
And so, if canonizations are infallible, it would have to come from that authority, just logically, wouldn't it?
Right. And so that means that the canonization process doesn't matter.
Well, I think I see your rationale on that. But just because the church has a grant of infallible authority doesn't mean that the church can't choose to have a logical or sensible or practical way of exercising that authority.
And I agree. I think that the process makes sense, and I wish we would go back to the original way, or not the original way, but the medieval way of doing the canonization process. Because I think
popular
that was the best
acclamation?
Way. No, medieval was the creation of the canonization process. It was pre-medieval where people was by popular acclamation. And so I think we should go back to that way, where we had a devil's advocate, we had the head of the Holy Office try to make sure that the canonizations were valid or were good. But the question is that I have for people whenever we talk about canonizations infallibility, because people will bring up the canonization process, and I'm saying, well, if the canonization process is what makes it infallible, then whenever we change it, does that mean it's not infallible anymore? And
it's not the canonization process that makes them infallible.
It can't be.
The process is just the manifestation of the exercise of that authority.
Right. And so the question then becomes, by whose authority is it infallible? Is it by the Pope's proclamation of it, or is it by the sensus fidelium, or is it by the bishops who have legitimate authority in their diocese? So whose authority makes it infallible?
I can just imagine, the Protestants who have wandered into this conversation thinking, this is why I'm not Catholic.
Well, these things are.
They're interesting issues. I remember, who James Martin is.
Which James Martin? The Jesuit James Martin.
The Jesuit James Martin. I remember when he was a priest, and no, I'm sorry. He
said it, not me.
I'm going to get fired. No, he wrote, I think.
Oh, before you go, John Fisher says, "Are you saying there's no
Yeah,
Christopher
I saw
in heaven?"
that.
Yeah, I saying that there is, and that Saint Christopher is real. I'm saying that according to the new calendar, they took him off, and the argument for why they took him off is because the quote unquote modern theologians and historians were saying that there's very little to no evidence that he existed, and so they're saying that they were going to remove the calendar because he probably didn't exist. I'm saying I don't accept that. I think that Christopher is real. I pray to St. Christopher, and I have told the stories of St. Christopher many, many times on many places. And so I'm saying that St. Christopher is in heaven and he was a real person. Anyway, you continue. Finish your thought.
Yeah. Father Martin, back before he became the modern activist he is today, wrote what I found to be a very enjoyable and encouraging book about the cult of the saints called, My Friends the Saints. And especially as a convert, it was an easy read and a good introduction to the cult of the saints. And non-Catholics will think the phrase cult of saints or cult of the saints is strange. But whether we have a formal canonization process or whether we don't, it is encouraging as Catholics to know that we do have these friends of God that we can pray to.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. I mean, the vast majority of saints, I'm like, obviously I love the saints. I tell the stories of the saints every morning, but
we have plenty to choose from.
And we do have plenty to choose from.
More than we could ever really work through.
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, Butler's Lives of the Saints is like that big. You have to be careful, though, when you buy Butler's Lives of the Saints, is because there's many versions that are revised editions, and what they will do is they will not only just take out excerpts, but they will edit them. And I found this out because my friend Emily, who was the co-host of the show way back when, she purchased the Butler's Lives of the Saints, female saints, and she's like, oh, that's cool. I'll be able to read through just the female saints, right? She starts reading it, and she's like, this sounds really strange the way it's worded.
Are they using inclusive language?
And they were using inclusive language. They were promoting them very feminist ideas.
I was
going to
say that as a joke, but as you went on, I thought, my gosh, this is going to be what happened.
And so she goes through it. She's like, this is Butler's Lives of the Saints. There's no way he had this like ideology and this way of talking back then. She looks to the front and it says revised edition, revised by so and so, including the yada yada yada. Has this like edited by, and she was like, oh my goodness, they changed it and then they kept the name Butler's Lives of the Saints on it, and it's so deceptive. That's so deceptive. The revolutionaries are so clever in the way they do things. But yeah, can you believe that? That's crazy.
Well, look, if they will mess with the language of the Bible, if they're gonna doctor the language of Holy Scripture, I'm not shocked that they would.
That's true.
They would go do a non-inspired work.
Do you know what it is? The phrase in Latin, "What's true of the greater is true of the lesser." It's a principle in logic, and I'm forgetting what it is in Latin. But anyway, the idea is if someone would do X, then it's much easier to believe they would do Y.
Right.
And I guess...
prosecutors make that argument all the time, of course.
There you go.
You know.
Yeah. See, I would make a great lawyer. I
think you would make a good lawyer. And I don't say that lightly. I usually encourage people not to go to law school.
Really?
And I encourage you. Well, most people go to law school go with a misconception that it is like what they see on TV. And the reality is that most lawyers spend most of their time sitting at a desk going through papers or the modern digital equivalent of papers.
Do you think AI will remove the necessity of paralegals?
AI, there's already talk in the legal profession about how AI will not only remove the jobs of some paralegals, but remove the jobs of some lawyers.
Really?
Yeah.
What lawyers would that be affecting?
Well, junior lawyers, for example. I mean, you would need less demand for lawyers because if AI can do legal research and legal writing, that's mostly what lawyers do on the litigation side. Most people think of lawyers as going to court and arguing. The reality is that most legal decisions are determined by writing. That's why when we hear about big arguments at the United States Supreme Court, the justices at the Supreme Court have largely made up their mind because before the argument, because by the time they get to oral argument, they have already read the briefs. The lawyers pour all of their professional work, all their professional efforts into those legal briefs. That's where you're supposed to spell it all out, like literally write it down for them. It's right there in black and white for them to read. And by the time you go to oral argument, it's not that it's a dog and pony show. It's a question to clear up. It's an opportunity to clear up questions, and you could possibly make a new point. On those rare occasions that happens, a lawyer will actually submit another writing afterwards.
Oh, really?
Yeah, saying, here's the legal authority for that point I made, something like that. So if artificial intelligence can do legal research and do legal writing, then you are going to eliminate some jobs in the legal field. This is going to be a real challenge for society in the future as more physical jobs, such as factory jobs, get automated. And now we're looking at intellectual jobs being automated.
Yeah. Hold on one second. Alan Smith, good morning. Are you still there?
I'm here, and boy, I've enjoyed this conversation this morning. It's just nice to be what I just call just sitting at the feet of the master, listening in on, and your discussion about, saints, again, the scrutinies of old and the scrutinies of new. I am blessed to have spent 10 years working with the good folks in Peoria, Illinois, on the cause of Fulton Sheen's canonization process. So I'm very, privy to the inside information of what goes on in the Vatican. And, behind me is a 2,000-page positio, which is a position paper that our vice postulator, Monsignor Sosman, put together, and God rest his soul, just a great body of work gathering the testimonies of people from all over the world about the life of Fulton Sheen, good and bad. Sometimes we paint stories of saints that's all good, but the lives of the saints, there is those difficult moments in their life, and they should be noted because we can learn from them. And so, again, interesting to hear your conversation about, is this one legit? Is this one not? Again, the argument will continue, but I think the saints are offered to us as holy examples to help us get to heaven. We may wrestle with the whole idea of, will Fulton Sheen ever be declared a saint in our lifetime? Sometimes I say, does it matter? Because it's what he wrote and what he said that I can use in my daily journey here to draw closer to Jesus and to Our Lady. So again, yes, I would like the church to declare him a saint, and we could argue if it's, after Vatican II or before Vatican II, or which ones are good, which ones aren't. But still, I think on our faith journey, the saints are that holy example. And so I'm glad to have Fulton Sheen in my life to teach me to.
That's a great point, Alan. That's a really good point, because I think this conversation happens, and the common accusation that I will get against myself, they'll say, well, if you don't think the modern canonization process is good, are you just going to reject all the modern saints? And I would say, of course not, because, for instance, Padre Pio, I mean, there's no doubt. I don't need any canonization process to tell me Padre Pio is a saint. The children of Fatima, Our Lady canonized them whenever she said that they were going to go to heaven. So I don't need the canonization process. I'm happy the canonization process happened. I'm glad that the church proclaimed them saints. But even if they didn't, I would be like, yeah, they're saints for sure. So there are some of the saints that are post council, post the change in the and this obviously is not even have anything to do with the council. Actually, it's completely separate. It's just post the time period of the council. But the changing of the canonization process, yeah, I mean, if Fulton Sheen is never canonized, I mean, before he's servant of God, I took the name Fulton as a novice, and yet he was not a saint. So I think that's a perfectly legitimate to have devotion to people. Sister Wilhelmina, that's going to be another one probably who is going to have popular acclamation, people recognizing her as saints and praying to her, despite the fact that she is not canonized or even a servant of God yet. So I think that's 100% correct, Alan. I'm 100% behind what you're saying.
They should. Right. They really need to bring back the devil's advocate. I mean, it's based on a fundamental traditional idea that the truth will out when people are engaged in debate. I mean, that's what lawyers do in the common law court system in the United States and the English-speaking world all the time. When I go into court, I'm arguing against somebody, and the fact that that person is pressing me in my arguments causes me to work that much harder in my analysis, that much harder in looking at the evidence, that much harder in analyzing it very carefully. So why wouldn't you want to do that in the canonization process?
Yeah, that's a good
Why
question.
wouldn't you want somebody looking and saying, hey, wait a minute, there might be something here that we need to look at in this saint's behavior that wasn't public knowledge. Why wouldn't we want that?
Mm-hmm. Alan, one interesting thing is one of the reasons why they didn't want to canonize, I think it was Pius X, was because he smoked a cigarette every day, and he would say occasionally a 20-minute low mass, and that was one of the reasons why they did not want to canonize him. That was the arguments from the devil's advocate. And I was like, there you go.
Now, from my point of view as an attorney, I will say that's good news, because really what the devil's advocate is saying is, I got nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
I got nothing. My job is to present a case.
This is
Here
the
it
best I can
is.
do.
Yeah, here it
I
is.
think that's awesome. Nancy says, does Alan Smith know Peter Howard? He's leading a movement to get Bishop Sheen canonized. And Sci-Fi Mike says, how does Alan feel about his work being fallible? Whose work, Sci-Fi Mike? Alan's work or Fulton Sheen's work? Or what do you mean by his work? Let's say you, Alan, the two comments there.
Well, so I'll answer that. Yeah. Dr. Peter Howard is a layperson who loves Sheen and who's trying to bring an awareness to Sheen's writings, of course, the canonization process. Lay people can take up these movements, I like to say. Of course, I'm known as the gentleman that, of course, started Bishop Sheen Today back in 2012, have radio shows all over the world, in Australia, the Philippines, the United Kingdom, America, and Canada. So, I have a notoriety of being a Fulton Sheen expert, and of course on the team to see that Fulton Sheen's cause is moved forward, and that of course his writings are read, what he wrote and what he said. We want people to listen to Sheen, read Sheen, and watch Sheen. So Dr. Peter Howard is a layman who is very enthusiastic about beating the drum to try to move the cause forward, because politics has creeped in to what I call this canonization process. And it's been sad to see, the church hand over the cause to the courts. They're waiting to see what the New York Attorney General is going to write in the report before they move forward. We never saw that before in the lives of the saints, where they went to a civil authority to get a judgment. And I think this needs to be brought to people's attention to say, why are we going down this road? And some people may say it's a stalling tactic. Other people may have other ideas. But in the end, we still have to bring up the question, why? So I think that's, again, a little note on Dr. Peter Howard. And of course, he wrote a book on Our Lady, Sheen's writings on Lady. So he knows what he's talking about. He's got the wit doctor in front of his name. And so he's read a lot. And so good for him. And we'll pray for him. And of course, the infallible stuff, I think, is more about Fulton Sheen's writings. And, Father Andrew Apostoli, God rest his soul, he was also our vice postulator for the cause. He says, if you want to become a saint, don't write 66 books, do 20 years of television or radio. And, it was true. I'm glad you're laughing, because
it's true.
Yeah. But because we sent everything to the Vatican. When Bishop Janke in 2002 went to the Vatican to open up the cause, and he got the title Servant of God, the Vatican then said, okay, send over his material. And so we did send over to the Vatican his 66 books, his many articles, his television show transcripts, his radio transcripts, and the theologians of the cause of the saints started to go through those works. And so there was a 10-year period for them to research and to look at things. And so when Pope Benedict XVI declared Sheen venerable, that title means worthy of imitation, and that his writings were then approved. They found no error in them. And you look at every one of Sheen's books has an imprimatur and a nihil obstat. So they all were pre-approved even before they were published and approved by the church. And so that's kind of the testimony to say, hey, you can trust what he wrote and what he said, because again, they have scrutinized them, but it's a 10-year process. So if he only wrote one book, I think the process would have sped along, but he wrote 66 books. And of course, volumes and volumes of radio and television transcripts. So there's a lot there. So there's the answer.
I pray to God, but I'll let you go in just a second. But I pray to God that nobody opens a cause for canonization for me, because one, I don't deserve it. And two, you'll find out I don't deserve it. And when people start investigating my life and start, they watch every single episode of Catholic Drive Time and every podcast I've ever done. And oh my, that'd be horrible. No, please don't. No, do not.
Well, speaking of Fulton Sheen's television work, when you sent his materials over there, did you all send over his the statement he made when he won the Emmy?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
Beautiful.
telling people.
Yeah.
I love telling people that one. I want to thank my writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
That's funny.
Well, but to be serious for a moment, let's remember what the significance of that. That was back in an era when television was new.
Mm-hmm.
There were not a multitude of streaming services and broadcasters to choose from. Television wasn't as sophisticated, but the competition was intense. And this man goes on television dressed in full Roman regalia in the preconciliar church and wins over an extraordinary audience. And why? Because he was a powerful and compelling teacher and an inspiring preacher of the truth.
Yeah, for sure. Lost Creole says, that leaves us for only martyrdom, Adrian. So true. So true.
What type of martyrdom?
And we have an opportunity to be martyrs today. Sci-Fi Mike says, gotta run. Have a great day. And Sci-Fi Mike's clarified, Alan, he says, no, how do you feel about Alan, your work being fallible?
Well, I have a great devil's advocate in my good wife Paisley. She scrutinizes so many things, and I tell you, she makes me
spoken
look
like a
good.
true husband.
True, yes. She does my hair, she does lots of things, but she screens all of my writing. Like whenever I'm going to write an article for Catholic Exchange magazine or whoever has asked me to write an article, she proofreads it, corrects it. She's a grammar expert. I call her the grammar slammer, but she puts all the punctuation in and the grammar. So my good wife makes me look good, both, on television, but also in writing. So behind every good man is a even greater woman. So
Amen.
There you go.
Mary Maliniski says, Alan, how much communication is there between all the people involved in the canonization process of a prospective saint, or do each have his or her own job in it?
All right. To answer that question, so when a cause is opened up, you have your team. So we have, of course, I'm speaking to Fulton Sheen's cause, the team in Peoria, people, the diocesan officials. We have our group of people. We have a vice postulator, which, of course, runs the affairs and takes the inquiries and does a lot of the business dealings. But in Rome, a postulator is assigned to you. And so that's the Rome delegation. So you funnel everything through the postulator in Rome, who then deals with the Vatican. So every time the Vatican asked for something, be it, again, a copy of a transcript or a testimony or medical records, the postulator would write to us, and then we would then, of course, send stuff back to him, because in our case, it's a gentleman. So again, so there is this back and forth, our people talking to your people, but again, the Vatican assigns a postulator to each cause, and then the cause in turn has a vice postulator. And hopefully that makes sense. But there is a process. And again, I try to say to people, and this is the sad part, it does cost money. I think a lot of times people think, oh, these causes, it's by the church, it's all funded by the church, and there's unpaid nuns working in the Vatican doing paperwork. No, there's paid employees there. And so to move a cause along, you have to keep paying the bill. And so there have been bills that are issued to the cause from the Vatican to say, can you help pay our people? And that money has to be raised to pay those bills. So
what bills do they have, Alan? Are they, for example, like charging like by the hour for the time it takes someone to go through all the documents page by page?
Well, it's kind of I've never actually seen the itemized bill, to say, correlations this,
Taylor, can you?
reading this.
We'll let the music. We'll turn the music down. We'll finish through this conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So I've never seen the bill, but I have been told we need to come up with 8,000 euros to pay this bill. But again, you think about what's at the Vatican now. There isn't, again, tons of the religious sisters that are running or doing things, for the love of God. They're Italians that have been hired that do this process. So, again, I don't know if it's an hourly rate or what it is, but it's agreed upon. And so many causes stall because they don't have the money to pay the bill. And so it's kind of like you pay the bill, you will go through the next set of papers. So I'm rambling on here. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it makes sense. But
Yeah, it makes
I will.
sense.
I'm going to ask them to send me a copy, and then I can know for a fact that what these bills were. But we've had to raise tens of thousands of dollars to pay the invoices that come from the Vatican. So I think people get upset when they hear that. But that's the reality. It does take money to move your, your candidate along the process. So there you go.
All right.
It helps, yeah. Again, we can go. We'll continue next week. Okay.
Yeah. We'll continue the conversation. No, it's really interesting, and it might be worth having somebody on who's a actual, like, the head of one of these processes to go through these kind of things. It's really interesting.
We'll have Monsignor Gray on the show. Have him as a guest because he can answer all the. Yeah, I'll put you in touch.
Yeah.
All the current questions, like people are saying, "What's going on today? Please update us today." And so Monsignor Gray is our go-to person in Peoria, and he's been on EWTN television just recently, kind of updating the cause. His motto is "Sheen is clean." We know that everything is good. Sheen is clean, and so we're really pushing, again, just trying to re-engage the culture to say, let's get this cause going again. But Monsignor Gray I'll give you his contact information, and it'd be great to have him on the show. So
Sounds
that's good.
All right. God bless you, Alan. God love you, and we'll see you back next week.
Okay. God love you too.